Part 3. Access to Parish Buildings. When we think of access, we often consider ramps and restrooms and little else. But access involves so much more.
Well, my husband and I are both blind. So first of all, we have to think about how we're going to get where we want to go. With our daughter, we have to think about when are her tube feeds? What time are we going to go? What time are we going to get back? Is it a time when we need to feed her? Can we make an adjustment? We had to make sure we had enough room to get her in and out of the stroller. By the time you get to church, you're already tired. And then, because she weighs 75 pounds, and so you're doing the transfer, you have to have room to get her in and out. The church is accessible, but then you got to think about when you're there. Devonna grabs at everyone. She doesn't understand to leave her hands down. The pews that we would sit in are the front. So you're thinking a whole time in church, okay, you got to pay attention to where her hand is so she doesn't grab at someone as they're going by. And then she's not very quiet. And so we don't take her to church very often.
But it's also in conversation. Give the disabled a chance to speak fully and completely. It takes them a little longer to move about a room. It takes them a little longer to open a page of a book. So be patient.
We certainly recognize that we can't solve every problem or correct every situation or serve each person exactly the way they might want to be served. But on the other hand, we recognize that there are many things that can be done and ought to be done. And when you do them kind of as a matter of course and not just as a new surprise, I think most of the time then it doesn't seem too insurmountable.
The ushers always come and say, how do you do? We're welcome, you're glad to be here, you know. But then, and you have to sit over here. Whether your family is over here or not, you know, there are 3 slots cut out. You better sit in those slots if you're in a machine. And then please don't get in line for communion like everybody else. We'll bring it to you. And there's much flurry. And that doesn't exactly make me feel welcomed.
That was one of the things we did in the planning stage. We looked around and said, what assets do we have? We have an accessible church, accessible bathrooms, and accessible meeting room. What was not accessible was the sanctuary. Anyone in a wheelchair could not get access to be a Eucharistic minister, and we could no longer be lectors. The church is very accessible for Mass and for services. I would like it to be accessible for service beyond simple attendance, but greater participation.
Deaf people are disabled because we have lost our ability to hear. And quite often there are situations that make us disabled. For example, if I was to go to Mass and there was not a sign language interpreter, I am disabled sitting there during Mass. But at the same time, deaf people can drive a car, they can live independently, they can walk, they can do many, many things. But it's the language that causes the barrier. It's the language. And we have more in common with other groups speaking different languages who have difficulty in mainstream society. That is how it is for us to be deaf.
We have special this, special that, special programs for disabled people. Well, we're not special. We're people. We're just like everybody else. I want to be included in Mass. I want to be included in the teachings. I want to be included in the programs the church is running. I want to be included in everything. So if you're having a program in your church, if it's down in the basement, pull it upstairs. You got rooms to change some of the rooms that you've got, make them accessible, put the ramps in. So I think that inclusion's coming. But a lot of time people think, well, it's easier to put all those people over here. You know, no, we don't want that. I want to go to the same hall you go into. I want to go into the same church building. I want to go into the same confessional.
The Cathedral of the Diocese has been made accessible, especially by the previous Bishop Daly. He made it a point to have not only the church be accessible with the ramp and power-assisted doors, but also the parish hall, which is across the street, is both accessible with the ramp through a side door, and it has two wheelchair accessible toilets for men and women. So those facilities are very accessible.
The idea of being a Catholic woman with a disability didn't really hit me until I moved out on my own. I grew up in a suburb of Burbank, Illinois, and our church was right across the street. And my father, knowing that I was exempt from going to Mass every Sunday, my father would still carry me up the stairs because he felt it was important that I still practice my faith.